The night before Ben's wedding. I was trending on social media for getting cozy with his brother, Ken, and became a laughing stock in high society. Everyone was criticizing me for being shameless. I tearfully tried to explain to Ben that last night, I only had a drink that Ken gave me. Ben didn't listen to a word I said. I wiped my tears, gathered evidence, and got Ken sent to jail. Ken tragically died in prison, tortured by fellow inmates. Ben blamed me and called me a femme fatale, and started destroying my family's business, leaving us in ruins. Then, I woke up. Ben's brother was handing me that spiked juice. I smiled and handed it to Ben when he wasn't looking. Is it too much to ask for these brothers to get along for once in this life? On live broadcast, my parents were apologizing endlessly. We're sorry, we'll resolve the company's materials issue. Please give us more time. Their slightly grayed hair was painful to see. Just a month ago, they were full of energy. Ben looked at me challengingly, waving his phone like he had one. See this, Kelly? This is what happens when you go against me. In the live stream, my parents leaned on each other, bowing and apologizing amid curses. Even then, netizens wouldn't let up. Heartless businessmen. Why don't they just die? Isn't their daughter a vixen too? The whole family is rotten. Go die. Comments kept cursing us. My parents continued to apologize, but no one listened. I knew our building materials were fine unless someone meddled. I glared at Ben. It was you. He laughed disdainfully. Yeah, it was me. Kelly, vile women like you deserve this payback. Remember, the shame your parents are going through is all because of you. You should be dead. Ben's words were full of humiliation. He truly hated me, even targeting my family for revenge. All of this because Ken, his brother, loved me but couldn't have me, and tried to drug me to keep me close. When everyone looked down on me, I took Ken to court and got him jailed. Ken was attractive and became victim to sadists in prison. When Ben heard the news, he came to me looking deranged. You witch. You seduced my brother and when you failed, you got him imprisoned. And he died in shame? Kelly, why didn't you die instead? I found it absurd. Why was I getting blamed for Ken's wrongdoing? The last thing Ben said to me was, Kelly, I'll never let you go. In a year, he made good on that. In that year, he relentlessly suppressed my family's business, even resorted to sabotage. Faulty construction materials led to an accident, killing 3 workers. Then Ben stepped in, blew it up, and now the whole internet was against my parents. Not quite done, Ben locked me in a small room and forced my parents to go live. Through the small phone screen, I saw my parents hadn't aged well in a month. They were bowing repeatedly. But Dad already had a heart condition, he couldn't take this kind of stress. Suddenly, Dad's body stiffened, his eyes rolling back, and he collapsed. He died from a heart attack. I snapped and lunged at Ben, but he moved away easily and I couldn't even touch him. I stormed out of the room, I had to get to them. Ben didn't stop me. He watched me run, like he had planned everything. But as I rushed onto the road, a car came speeding toward me. It was clear, they wanted me dead. When the car hit, I was still thinking, I owed it to my parents. My last memory was dying in that crash. Looking up at the sky, I felt so wronged. Why did I have to suffer when I didn't do anything wrong? I opened my eyes and realized I was back a year ago. I clutched my racing heart, trying to suppress my excitement. Ken was right there, handing me that cursed drink. Not showing any signs of what I knew, I took the juice with a smile. Last time, that drink left me unconscious. I'm reborn, and I won't let that happen again. A bold plan formed in my mind. What would it look like if 2 brothers turned against each other? I suppressed the craziness within me. When I looked up again, Ken had already passed me the drink. I accepted it. When Ken turned to grab something else, I handed it to Ben. I took Ben's original drink. We were engaged, and the wedding was the next day. He had no reason to suspect me. Without hesitation, he drank it all. I watched, smiling as he finished it. Then shifted the cup with his original drink, pressing my lips to the spot Ben had used. To others, it seemed we were sweetly in love, so the glances began to change. Ben seemed convinced too. As I drank the juice, Ken turned back, watching me, barely containing his eagerness. I lowered my eyes. Thinking about what was next, I couldn't help feeling excited. Half an hour later, Ben started acting weird. He dragged me to a corner, kissing me recklessly. "Give it to me, give it to me." I held back my nausea, cooperating with him, as I half pushed, half pulled him into the room Ken had already set up for us. "Ken, something's off with you. Wait here for me. I'm going to find a doctor." "Don't go. Kelly, I want you. Give me." Ben clung onto me tightly. The drug was strong, he still recognized me. But soon, it wouldn't matter who was in front of him. "Be good. Don't make a scene. I'll be right back." I took out the sedative I had prepared and, without mercy, jabbed it into his thigh. Finally, he was quiet. I quickly tidied myself up, pretending like nothing happened, and left the room. "Ben, don't worry. It's just a mild sedative. You'll be awake soon enough, and then the suppressed effects of the drug will hit hard again. By then, Ken won't be getting away." Back at the party, I dodged the crowd, leaning against the wall, feigning dizziness and confusion. Just as I was about to fall, a big hand caught me. He was wearing the same white shirt and black trousers as Ben, even using Ben's signature woody cologne. Both were twins, and under the guise of clothing and scent, last time I couldn't tell he was Ken after being drugged. So I naturally leaned into his arms, thinking I was being protected, and trusted him completely. That's why later, people claimed I willingly leaned into Ken's arms, which was taken as evidence of my deliberate seduction. But this time, my blood was boiling, and my mind was as clear as ever. I moaned softly, eyes dazed. "Ken, I feel so hot. Do I have a fever?" "I'll take you to a room," Ken said, feigning concern, his Adam's apple bobbing as he smiled triumphantly. I let him lead me to the door of the room again. Suddenly, I stopped, pretending to be anxious. "Ken, the press conference is starting. You should go." "It's not important." "It is. It's about our family's future collaboration and our wedding." "Ken, go on. I'll wait for you to return." I pretended to act up because of the drug, my voice getting louder. Ken had no choice but to repeatedly tell me to go inside and rest, pretending to leave. I quickly hid. In less than half a minute, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Sure enough, Ken couldn't resist coming back. The gates of hell had finally opened. The show had begun. When Ken finally opened the door with all his might, the reporters were all there. The noise he and Ben made was too much. The original stars of the press conference didn't show up. Upon hearing the commotion, the reporters swarmed like they had tomorrow's headline in sight. I listened from the next room, hearing everything clearly. What a shame nothing really happened yet. "Doctor. Call a doctor." I heard the butler's voice, thinking the scene next door must be pretty gripping. While I couldn't witness it, I had to finish my performance. I slammed into the bed frame, and in my semi-conscious state, I vaguely saw the room door open before I passed out. When I came to, both Ben and Ken were by my side. Ben looked upset, and Ken's eyes were full of suspicion. When he saw the wound on my forehead, he frowned slightly. "Ken, my head hurts." Why are we at the hospital? We were supposed to get married today." Ben paused. "You fainted yesterday. The wedding's postponed. Do you remember anything from last night?" I pretended not to see Ken's pale face and clenched fists, seriously recalling. "I think I suddenly got a fever, and then someone took me to rest. After that, I lost consciousness. My head hurts. I can't remember." I've been frail since childhood, and sudden fevers aren't rare. And it's normal to enter the wrong room when disoriented. Plus, I accidentally fell and knocked myself out. Ben said nothing more, and Ken's gaze softened a bit. I heard from others about the scenes I missed last night. Outwardly, I acted shocked, but inside, what a pity. Although they caught Ken looking disheveled, with drool marks on his face, his clothes a mess. Behind him, Ben looked enraptured. Clearly, nothing had happened yet. Ben's family hastily announced a delay to the wedding. I also told my parents to stay out of Ben's family disputes without explaining much. They didn't ask, just happily agreed. My eyes felt wet. They're such honest and kind people, yet in the past life, they met such an end. After calming down, I said goodbye to my parents and returned to Ben's place. Ben, Ken, this time around, I'm here to play. With Ben's keen sense, he would suspect last night's events. He's always cautious about what he eats, so the only anomaly was the drink I handed him that night. But it was Ken who passed it to me. This could be figured out. So, as soon as Ben pieced it together, he confronted me. You think it was my brother? No way. Feigning surprise, I held his hand. He spoke coldly, but the evidence all points to him. If I hadn't drunk that drink, you'd have been the one caught in this mess. Plus, someone saw him leading you upstairs as you were burning up. I paused at his words, pushing down my hatred, speaking firmly. Ken, if you're not well, I'll help you rest, then get a doctor. Afterward, I suddenly got a fever, and it was only natural for Ben to suggest resting. Ben's family is pretty powerful, and a lot of eyes are watching us. This time, someone's definitely trying to set him up. You and Ben are real brothers, you gotta trust him. Ben patted my head and nodded. He was weighing how believable I was. Finally, he sighed and said, I'll get to the bottom of this. If someone's plotting against us, I won't let them go. I gazed at him intently. Ken, I'm always behind you. Then I went on my tiptoes and kissed him. He was surprised by the kiss, froze for a moment, then wrapped his arm around me, pulling me close. He kissed me deeply, oblivious to the soft footsteps behind us. I glanced at the door, purposefully left a bit ajar, and saw Ken standing there. Ken had seen me defend him, and now, watched as I kissed Ben. His face wasn't pretty, despite standing partially in shadows. But I could clearly see the deep jealousy and desire in his eyes. Nervously, I pushed Ben back slightly. Ben was a bit displeased and asked in a raspy voice what was wrong. I pointed towards the door shyly. Little brother's here, I explained. Ben's expression remained stern as he glanced outside. Ken stepped out from the shadows, back to his usual composed self, and with a polite smile said, You forgot you have a meeting soon? Ben checked his watch. Half an hour left till the meeting. He was about to say something when I nudged him. Go on, get to work, I urged, whispering, we can continue tonight. My words were loud enough for Ken to hear. Ben finally seemed satisfied. He kissed me lightly before leaving with Ken. Ken threw me one last glance before heading out. His eyes were filled with jealousy and possessiveness. I knew why Ken liked me so much. I always treated him well, like a brother. My mom said they lost their mother early on, and I needed to fill that gap with enough affection. That was the way to secure my place in Ben's family. But turns out, Ken was twisted, and he wanted to claim me by destroying me. As the night fell, the courtyard lights flickered on. I was leaning on the balcony when I heard the sound of a car below. Someone's back. As I moved to turn on the light, there was a rustle behind me. Suddenly, I was forcibly turned around, and through the dim light, I recognized Ken. He was dressed almost exactly like Ben, even changed his cologne and removed his black diamond earring. I couldn't help but laugh inside. Ken, you can't handle the heat. I put a bit of distance between us intentionally. Ken, I thought we were waiting until later. It's still early. But before I could finish, he lunged in for a ferocious kiss. Just then, I could hear Ben's voice on a call, getting closer. My heart pounded hard. Just a door apart from Ben, but here I was, kissing his brother. Was Ken not pretending anymore? Luckily, Ken let go of me after a few seconds. He looked at me, eyes blazing in the darkness. If I dress like him, will you love me then? He asked desperately. He clung to my shoulders as if he wouldn't let go without a real answer. He was trying to be Ben. Just minutes ago, he was the same childlike Ken. I played dumb, eyes welling with tears, making me look innocent and unable to speak. As if I'd nod if I could. Footsteps stopped outside, and I could hear Ben placing his hand on the doorknob. Then, the door opened and Ben walked in. He looked a bit surprised to see Ken there. But before he could ask, Ken said, "I left my watch here by mistake." Ken held up a fancy watch as proof. Ben nodded, not suspecting a thing, and as they passed each other, Ben asked, "Seen Kelly?" Ken paused for a second, then calmly said, "I saw her in the back garden." Ben was about to say more, but Ken dragged him out. "Brother, Mother's anniversary is soon, we need to prep," he said, and their voices faded away. Relieved, I stepped out from behind the curtain. Looks like I'm close to succeeding. Later that night, when Ben and I were close, he stopped. He was staring at my lip, which had a small bruise. His finger gently traced it. What happened here? I internally panicked. Ken's kisses were too rough and broke the skin on my lips. I accidentally bit myself, I lied. Ben chuckled but seemed annoyed. Then he bit my lip hard, creating a matching bruise on the other side. Bit yourself? Really? He quipped, seeing through my lie instantly. But now wasn't the time to confess, so I gritted my teeth. Yeah, myself. Ben held me tight, almost suffocating me. When I was gasping for air, he loosened his grip. His hand wandered on my body. I stopped him, trying to calm him down. "Ken, I want our first time to be on our wedding night. In my last life, things went awry just before our wedding. This life, plans had shifted. Ken, I just love you too much. You know, a girl's first time is special, it should be with the one she truly loves, on our wedding day." Ben relaxed a bit. The next morning, when I went downstairs, only Ken was at the table having breakfast. I walked over to him, casually pouring him a glass of milk. As I handed it to him, my fingers just barely brushed against his palm. But when he looked up at me, I was already back in my seat, munching on my bread as if nothing had happened. Ken ignored me, taking the jar of mango jam and spreading it meticulously over his bread. He spread it just like Ben, covering every corner. Ben used to say his mom always covered every bit of the bread with jam, and he kept that habit. But Ken hated all jams. Plus, he was allergic to mangoes. Ken kept ignoring me, focused on spreading the jam, and then, without hesitation, took a bite. "Wait!" I called out, but it was too late. He had already bitten into the bread. Panic set in as I quickly grabbed his wrist to stop him from taking another bite. "You're allergic to mangoes. You can't eat that," I said urgently. He just stubbornly kept chewing. "No way. Spit it out," I insisted, pinching his cheeks to make him stop. He seemed amused by my actions. He didn't respond, just laughed lightly before spitting the bread into the trash. "You can tell us apart, can't you?" His eyes held a soft, amused look, but there was something more in his tone. When I didn't answer, he pressed, "You can tell the difference between me and my brother, right?" I lowered my eyes, slowly letting go of his wrist. Then, out of nowhere, he grabbed my hand. I tried to pull away, but he was too strong. I couldn't budge. He gently turned my face toward him, making me look straight into his eyes. "Look at me, Kelly." Staring into his eyes, I took a deep breath. "Ken, I'm your brother's fiancé." That didn't bring him back to his senses. Instead, it seemed to drive him wilder. "I know. So what? I like you, Kelly. I can't believe you haven't noticed. Yesterday I opened my mouth, struggling to speak. Ben. It was dark, and you guys look similar. I couldn't tell the difference. He just chuckled and lifted my chin, continuing, but you realized I wasn't Ben eventually and still didn't push me away. His eyes were a bit red with emotion as he accused me. So what? I'm your brother's fiancé. This is impossible. Ken refused to give up. I don't believe you. Ken, you should know why our families are set on this alliance. Your family is the biggest real estate company in New York, and my family supplies the best materials. Together we can achieve more. Right now, Ben holds the reins of your family. Do you understand what I mean? Ken looked at me with his reddened eyes, clearly hurt. Is that what you really mean? No, that's what my parents want. They want me to marry the one in charge of your family. Ken was silent for a moment. Just when I thought he might give up, he said the words I'd been longing to hear. Kelly, what if I'm the one running Ben's family? Would you choose me then? My hand trembled. Not from nerves, but excitement. It's possible. Ken actually went to talk to Ben. Despite never dealing with his family's business, or knowing anything about it, Ken suddenly approached Ben, asking for $1 billion to invest. $1 billion is no small number. Ben hesitated a bit, asking what Ken intended to do with the money. Ken gave a rather formal answer. For years, you've upheld the group, and I want to start helping out. Ben was happy to see his brother mature, but since the amount was substantial, he agreed to give Ken only $30 million. Though it wasn't what Ken hoped for, he knew he had to take his time, so he agreed. In the following days, Ken started mimicking Ben in every small way, from how he dressed to how he spoke. Especially on their mother's anniversary, Ken faced everyone with poise, his every action a mirror of Ben. It was clear they were brothers, almost cut from the same cloth. Hearing such remarks, Ken's smile never faded. By the next evening, Ben called me, saying there was an auction that night and asked me to accompany him. When we arrived at the venue, I noticed Ken was there too. He seemed calm, not at all like that morning, just sitting there and smiling at us. I wasn't particularly interested in the auction, so I remained quiet as it proceeded. Ben asked if there was anything I liked. I glanced at the jewelry on display, shaking my head. Ken, thanks for the thought, but I don't want you to spend unnecessarily. Ben appreciated my obedience, fueling his protective instincts. Suddenly, Ken started bidding, $30,000. I looked over in surprise at the item, which was a crystal fan-shaped hairpin. It had a very classic design. After Ken's bid, the room went silent. The initial bids were just a few thousand, so no one expected someone to jump to $30,000. $30,000 once. $30,000 twice. $30,000 thrice. Sold. The final gavel went down, and Ken won the hairpin. Ben noticed his brother's unusual behavior and asked, "This hairpin is nice, but it's not worth that much. Who's it for?" I held my breath, glancing instinctively at Ken. Ken just flashed a faint smile and mumbled, "A very important person." But soon enough, I figured out who this important person Ken was talking about, me. When that hairpin showed up in my room the next day, I wasn't nervous. I was excited. Very excited. That night, I deliberately said some suggestive things to Ben. Ben was quickly into it. But just as he was about to make a move, he noticed the hairpin I had purposely placed right in the middle of the vanity. His expression froze for a moment. I could clearly sense his displeasure and quickly slipped out of his embrace. "This was given to me by Ken," I explained, though weakly. "He said we're going to get married eventually, so this is like our wedding gift." My explanation was flimsy, and it did nothing to ease Ben's mood. His face turned dark as he pinched my chin, forcing me to look at him. "So the important person he talked about is you?" I tried to calm him down. "Ken, you're Ben's only brother. You're important to him, and that's why he treats me, his future sister-in-law, so well." Seeing that his mood wasn't as bad as before, I used the opportunity to say, "If it bothers you, I can return it right now." Ben's eyes lingered on the hairpin, his gaze unreadable. After a long pause, he finally said, "Yeah, I'll return it to him." While Ben was returning the hairpin, I could hear heated arguing downstairs. Initially, Ben was just unhappy with his brother's reckless behavior. And with Ben's suspicious nature, this obvious affection was enough to trigger his doubts. So, to completely quash Ken's idea, he took the initiative to introduce potential partners to Ken. "There are so many upscale girls, do you like any of them?" Ken grinned. "I do. The person I like has to have long, thick hair and an elegant aura just by standing there, like this hairpin. It seems made just for her." Bold provocation. Ben's displeasure showed clearly on his face, and the atmosphere cooled by several degrees. Yet Ken stared back without a hint of fear, both of them locked in a standoff. Ultimately, Ben broke the deadlock. "You've never been involved in the company business. Giving you a large amount of funds rashly might lead to mistakes. I'm planning to pull back on your support, and you should start at the bottom of the company." After saying this, Ben turned to leave, but Ken wasn't about to let him off. He smashed a vase nearby and shouted at Ben, "Are you this guarded against me? Are you scared? Scared that someday I'll replace you?" His words froze the room for a moment. Ken had hit the nail on the head. Even though Ben loved his brother, facing someone who mimicked him at every turn and who posed a constant threat of replacement, he couldn't help but be on guard. The company's overseas division needs people. Go there and get some experience. The overseas division answers only to me. You look like me, so I'm sure you'll adapt quickly. It was a cleverly crafted statement. Especially since Ken had been mimicking Ben everywhere lately, it was a direct slap to his face, as if saying, "So what if you imitate me? It's just an empty shell." Upstairs, I was enjoying the show. Argue, the more intense, the better. When Ben returned to the room, he was still visibly angry. I thoughtfully poured him a glass of water and went to rub his shoulders. "Did you have a fight with your brother?" I asked knowingly, but he didn't answer. Then I continued, "Your brother always looked up to you as a role model. You're who he idolizes, and he wants to learn more from you. He's grown up now and wants to help share some responsibilities." Ben lowered his eyes, and after drinking the water I handed to him, he pulled me into his arms with a strong jerk, causing me to land on his lap unguarded. I looked up and gave him a light peck on his eye corner. Finally, it was time to wrap things up. Ken had always obeyed his brother, so when Ben made this decision, Ken didn't have the nerve to oppose it. Thus, I added fuel to the fire. In an empty room, Ken sat looking at a family photo. I walked over and took the picture from his hand. He seemed a bit dazed. "Kelly, do you think I'm a complete failure? Mom always favored my brother, and now my brother carries the entire Ben family. I'm worthless." I ruffled his already messy hair. "Don't put yourself down. You'll always be the best, Ken." Hearing my words, he looked up at me, a bit hopeful. "So even if I'm nothing, would you still love me?" "Ben," my eyes avoided his as I replied, "I've already gotten engaged to your brother." "That doesn't matter. Answer me, Kelly. I'm going to marry your brother. Our wedding is set for the 15th of next month, and we haven't told anyone yet." He looked at me, hurt. "Why? Kelly, why won't you love me, even just a little?" I suppressed my disgust and forced out a few tears. "Ben, it's just that your brother, he's too domineering. I don't dare to go against his wishes." This hit Ken right where it hurt, as he had always obeyed Ben. Now being sent overseas by Ben made him even more discontented. A cruel look flashed in Ken's eyes. What if I completely replace him? I covered his mouth in panic, but he brushed my hand away. "If Ben can do it, so can I." "Ben, that's impossible. Ben would disregard others' lives for money." Before finishing my sentence, I quickly shut up. I glanced at Ken cautiously, pretending to be scared. But Ken seemed excited and grabbed my hand. What did you just say? No, I don't know anything. In my previous life, Ben messed with my family's building materials as revenge and later arranged a car accident to kill me. So in this life, I didn't believe he hadn't done something illegal. And just as expected, I found evidence of his tax evasion and unfair competition in the study. Like last time, he messed with other companies' materials for money, causing many accidents. Ken's lips curled into a smile. I knew he was planning to go after Ben. I'm not sure what Ken told Ben, but he didn't have to go to the overseas company anymore and stayed here instead. He was probably busy collecting evidence against Ben for the past few days because I didn't see him. Finally, on the 8th day, I saw him again. He seemed cheerful and confidently walked over to me, not hesitant as before. He suddenly hugged me. Kelly, I missed you so much. I pushed away from him. Your brother is upstairs. He looked at me steadily. Scared of what? He seemed so sure of himself, and I got excited. I glanced up at the room upstairs, calculating that Ben should be heading to the office. A plan started forming in my mind. I poured myself a glass of water, deliberately drank half, then left the rest on the table. As I left, Ken picked up the leftover glass and drank from my lipstick mark. Right then, Ben happened to see this. Ken had no idea he'd been exposed, or maybe he just didn't care. After drinking the water, he left the villa. I came out from hiding then. Looking up at Ben, I adjusted his tie for him. Ken, I have something to tell you. Go on. His eyes looked a bit cold. I think your brother feels something different for me. Maybe it's just my imagination, but he always seems to deliberately get close. Ken, I'm scared. My eyes filled with tears as I spoke. He hugged me suddenly, so tight I could hardly breathe. Kelly, you're mine. No one can take you away. No one. I knew at that moment that the seeds of doubt in Ben's mind had exploded. I didn't need to explain anything further. He already had his answer. Just as I suspected, Ben began pressing down on Ken harshly. But Ken wasn't the type to be easily dealt with. He directly threatened Ben with the evidence he collected. While the brothers fought fiercely, I filed lawsuits against both of them. One for tax evasion and malicious competition, which caused a few deaths. The other for attempted rape. It was a battle of mutual destruction. While they were at it, I took my time gathering evidence. And Ken's evidence was all prepared by Ben. I just had to release it. Ben still cared for his brother, giving Ken many chances. But over and over, his brother aimed to replace him. So, Ben finally took action too. It worked in my favor. When I visited Ben in jail, he looked at me for a long time and spat out 2 words, venomous woman. I picked at my ear. Ben, can't you find a new insult? You've been using the same line. The same words from the previous life. My cruelty was all thanks to you. I smirked at him. To ease things between you 2 brothers, I arranged for you to be in the same prison cell. Isn't that touching? I recalled Ken's cell from the last life. I remembered there were several perverts there who liked good-looking men. That's how Ken got played to death last time. I visited Ken too. He looked devastated. He stared at me incredulously. Why? I loved you so much. I was willing to do anything. Why did you do this to me? So funny. Are you sure that's love, not just selfishness? It's attempted rape, dude. Wake up. It's a crime. I chuckled at him affectionately. Don't worry about it. With that little brain of yours, you won't figure it out. Your brother is smart. If you had half his brains, you wouldn't be in this mess. So, you've been lying to me all along? He looked like he was about to lose it. Is there any doubt? I smiled at him, curled my lips, then turned and walked away. Just looking at those 2 brothers made me sick. The Ben family's business went bankrupt, and their story became a laughingstock around town overnight. I returned to my parents' company and successfully became a director. Luckily, I had warned my parents not to get involved with Ben's group, so my family's business wasn't affected. In fact, due to the public uproar, more attention was placed on building material standards. Our materials have always been top quality. Thus, more companies chose to work with us. Later, I heard about Ben and Ken's deaths. Just as I expected, they were targeted by those perverts in jail. Their twin status only added to the thrill for those freaks. A few days ago, they were literally played to death. Listening to my assistant's report, I signed my name on a document, my expression unchanged. You don't need to report anything about the Ben family to me again, it's bad luck. The assistant nodded, took the signed document, and left. The weather outside was perfect. I thought about my past self. Finally, it was all over.